Welcome everyone to the DORR meeting. Thank you all for being with us today. I'm Linda Scott. So I am the DORR office manager and on the board of DORR for those of you who I have not yet met. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am so excited. I'm trying to contain myself. I want to, first of all, you all deserve a big round of applause. Thank you so much for voting and participating in the past election. To those of you, that's right. To those of you who knocked on doors, passed out literature, worked the polls, thank you so much. It really paid off, and we're very grateful. The exciting news also, I couldn't help it. I had to share this today. In the Red Rock newspaper this morning, Scott Jablow, our new mayor of Sedona. Congratulations, Scott. We wanted to on the front page. Yes. Well, way to go.
Wait, what newspaper?
I'll show it to you later.
Refuse to pay for.
Right. Very exciting times. Just a couple of announcements. First of all, there'll be no December meeting. We'll all be celebrating the holidays and want you all to have a wonderful holiday season. Our annual meeting will be on January the 15th from 5 to 7 p.m. at St. Andrews. And we really encourage everyone to come. This is an important meeting where we make some important decisions for the coming year.
Is it a potluck?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't have potluck.
Usually.
Check the website.
Done that in the past that way.
Also, the film club will meet tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. And the movie is The Janes.
Tonight,
No, Frankie told me tomorrow night.
no, Friday, tonight. She told you that yesterday. Yeah.
Told me that today,
Oh.
that it was going to be on.
We all got emails, so.
Yeah, it's tonight.
Check your email.
Check your emails. All right, let's see what else I can mess up here. Okay.
You're doing great.
Today, I'm thrilled that we have two speakers with us, Keith Brekhus and Kathy Kinsella. And each of them are going to talk a little bit, and then together they're going to share their election insights. Keith is a congressional staffer, currently the district director for Congressman Tom O'Halloran, representing the largest and most rural Democratic congressional district in the continental United States.
Wow.
He is also a political analyst whose experience in Northern Arizona is useful for interpreting and contextualizing election results and data. He served the part of the political organization staff in Northern Arizona since 2014, working as a field organizer in the White Mountains in 2014 and a regional field director in 2016 on the CD1 congressional race. He was also a campaign manager to the LD6 legislative race for part of the 2016 cycle, serving mostly in Coconino and Yavapai counties. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
Quite a record. Sedona City Councilor Kathy Kinsella got involved in politics when she was 10, volunteering for the first presidential campaign with McGovern. Pretty nice. She has since gone on to have both a professional and volunteer career in government and community service, including her current position on the Sedona City Council. Kathy serves on the board of Democrats of the Red Rocks and lots of committees. And you may recognize her as one of the organizers of various community marches.
Stand.
You don't have to, just stay
Doesn't matter.
seated.
Okay.
Stay seated.
So can you hear me okay? Is mic fine? Okay.
Your mic isn't on. No, the mic is for Zoom.
No,
that mic needs to be turned on.
Oh.
No.
On the bottom.
That's good.
Well, this is probably it. Now I can hear it. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I guess most of you probably noticed, but a lot of the press was talking about a red wave. That never happened, thankfully. So Democrats did very well overall. Obviously, for some of us locally, the the congressional race was probably a little bit disappointing. Probably me more than others since he's been my job for the last 6 years, but it is important to note that redistricting, I think sometimes people didn't realize how big of a shift it was. The 9.6 point shift to the right. So we basically took a district that votes like Michigan. Trump won CD1, Arizona CD1 by a very small margin in 2016 and lost it in 2020, which is also what happened in the state of Michigan. And we moved to a district that's redder than the state of Texas. So this congressional district is Trump plus 8 district. Trump beat Biden in Texas by 6 in 2020, and no Democrat has won a major statewide race in Texas in 30 years. They will eventually, because it is a competitive state, but everything has to go right to win there. So if anybody worked on that campaign, I just want them to realize that it coming short was not any fault of any organizer or the candidate. It's just a much more difficult race. And if you do that 9.6 point shift, you find that had he stayed in the same district, he'd have been 4 for 4 in his races. In the new district, he never won the old district by over 9.5 points. So he'd been basically 4 for 4. So he didn't get beat by Eli Crane. He got beat by Erica Newberg in the redistricting commission. So it's just important to recognize that. And then I don't want to go too much long because I want Kathy to introduce and they'll have a discussion. But I do want to say the statewide races, of course, went very well here. We did win the governorship for the first time since 2006. Super exciting there, very close race. Of course, Mark Kelly returned to the Senate, also big deal. And then the one to really watch right now, the Attorney General's race. Chris Mays, as of this morning, was up by 236 votes. That is terrifyingly close. And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but it's a little concerning that 1,200 of the votes left from Maricopa County are box 3 votes from election day. Those are probably going to go very heavily for the Republicans. So it's possible that she'll lose the lead sometime today when those votes drop. Hopefully the remaining votes, like the provisionals in Pima County and Apache County, will be enough to keep her above 0. Either way, that race is going to recount, but it is very, very close and it could go either way. I'd consider that a toss-up. I could talk more about the national environment, but I think we'll do that later. I'd like to pass it to Kathy rather than talk too long. So.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So we have a bunch of congratulations to make. First of all, my mayor-elect, Scott Jablow, is with us. Thank you. And Scott came in with 57% of the vote. And we have about a 76% voter turnout for Sedona. So way to go, Sedona. You know, Sedona turns out time and time again. We always have an excellent rate. Yavapai County usually has one of the best voter turnout rates in the state.
Really?
Yeah, Yavapai County. Unfortunately, that's the red county that we're part of, which is interesting because even though Yavapai County is red and Coconino County is blue, the Sedona parts of it, the Yavapai portion of Sedona is bluer than the Coconino portion, which is redder. So we go counter to the county trends, which is interesting to know. But we also have some other congratulations to make. Karen McClelland, our immediate former president of DORR, won the 2 races that she was a candidate in, the Sedona Oak Creek School Governing Board. So congratulations to her on that. She's an incumbent, been reelected several terms now, and we really appreciate her service there. And was also elected to the Red Rock Road Maintenance District. That is a tongue twister. Say it 10 times fast. Red Rock Road Maintenance District. And what that does is takes care of it's a county position with its own separate board that makes the decisions for the maintenance on those medians. And their platform was to go to non-toxic herbicides. So way to go, Karen. And that obviously was a good platform to have because it was a resounding vote for her. So yeah, what's happening? We are almost closed out. We're like at 99% for both Coconino and Yavapai for the Sedona area votes. So that's pretty final. And as I said, Scott came in at 57%. Way to go, Scott. Election night was not a surprise in terms of the fact that the mail-in ballots that get counted first break to the blue. And then as the machine tabulations start coming in, we start to slip in the leads. And then we go into counting things that come in after that, and blue goes up a little bit more. So we have all been on a roller coaster. And how many other people have a locked finger from hitting refresh? Right? And your head's spinning on that Chris Mays race as well, with like, she's up 500. Oh, no, she's down. That's only 200 lead. Oh, 700. Oh my God, 100 and something. It's like, tennis match. So, but it's interesting. The congressional districts, I'm gonna ask Keith to speak to that again, because we were a 5-4 delegation previous to this election of 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans. And we're gonna hear, because I think there's still a race that's not called. Is that correct? So I'm gonna ask Keith to speak to that as well. I like to get into the weeds. So I want to just tell you what happened with, well, actually, before I even do that, let's talk about judges, because people always say, what happened with the judges? Because nobody ever knows, because it's such a low profile. We don't often do a lot of judicial endorsements because we don't have a lot of information on the judges until literally the 11th hour, as panels, independent review panels come out, and that information is always late breaking. So, but this year was interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is rare, and I mean really exceedingly rare, for judges to fail their retention. Retention votes here, right? So basically you have to really be on the radar as doing something egregious to not be, quote, reelected, because it's not really an election. It's, do you want to retain this person in office, yes or no? It's a yes or no vote for that, not a tick for a person. So not here, but in Maricopa County, 3 Ducey appointments were not retained. That is big news.
Wow.
Yeah, Rusty Crandall, Stephen Hopkins, and Howard Sukanek lost their seats. They will finish out their terms, which will be December 31st. Will not be reappointed. These will now become openings that the new governor, guess who that is? Point.
Wow.
So not only is this like a historic year that we actually were able to turn judges over, but we're in a position to actually have decent appointments. So it's big news, bigger news than I think even I've digested at this point. Another one I wanted to point out is that how close we came on the Arizona Supreme Court. There was a real movement and civic engagement beyond voting, which a lot of us have been following their information and been doing Toby's in the back, the postcard woman. We're just gonna call you Postcard. It's a nickname from now on. They started a little late in the game because, again, the judicial information, you just can't get it in a timely way. But they really started a campaign against Bill Montgomery to not retain him. And he came so close. I'm going to just get the numbers right here. He did get 55% of the votes in favor of keeping him employed, but that's nothing. These judges usually go in like by 90% of the vote cast is to retain judges. 55%, he's skating in just under the wire there with that. This is big. This means that there are movements that are turning their attention to those races, those lower level, those lower on the ballot, not lower level. They're all very important, but lower on the ballot races that we often don't have a lot of information. So this is telling, and I think setting a good precedent for what's going to happen in 2 years. I think you'll find Arizonans being more aware about the impact that these have. So I did want to touch on that. The other thing that, before I turn it back to Keith, that we'll just get a conversation going, is people always say what happened with the ballot measures, right? Because we do a lot of work around ballot measures because we understand that there's not a lot of information out there about those either. Anything that's down low on your ballot or on the back of the ballot, which people usually don't turn over, and there's such a drop-off rate for the voting. But there were 10 statewide ballot proposals that DORR took a position on, and there was one for Coconino County. I'll just do that one quick. That was the one for the Coconino County jail tax extension, which passed overwhelmingly. DORR did support that. That's great. It shows that people, when it's something local like that, they are paying attention. It was a really good voter turnout on that ballot proposal. And it follows 2 years ago, the Yavapai County jail tax extension also passing. Respect, you know, when you look back retroactively, it was pretty easy pass, although at the time you're always sweating it out. But what this means is people are understanding what the jails are doing here in our areas and the programs that they have, and they understand that the funding that's in place and the state is not doing it. You've got to have this tax revenue supporting it, or you will lose the programs that cut recidivism. You will lose English second language. You will lose GED. You will lose alcohol and substance abuse. Those are the things that will not get funded if these jail taxes were not in place. So good on the voters for understanding that and doing the right thing and passing that. So Prop 128 was a constitutional amendment that would allow the state legislature to rewrite citizen initiatives. We opposed that and it failed.
Yay.
Very good. Prop 129 would require citizen initiatives to address only a single subject. We oppose that and that has passed. What that does is, because it sounded good in the one paragraph that you get to look at, but what it means is now that the language threshold that citizen groups are going to have to write the ballot initiatives, the same threshold that the professional staff at the state legislature, that you know, lawyers and rules committees and you know look at without those resources. So it's a hard one for ballot initiatives. The disabled veterans property tax exemption that DORR supported, that did pass. The Prop 131 to create the Office of the Lieutenant Governor, which DORR did not support, it did pass.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. The League of Women Voters has supported that. So I mean, there are mixed feelings on that one, but you know, DORR did oppose it because we feel there was not enough of a definition of what that job would actually do, which is creating another layer of government to ensure that a party keeps control as opposed to actually having a real defined job. Prop 132, which would require a 60% supermajority to vote for citizens initiatives. Again, really unfair. So, you know, we used a simple majority vote, but now if it's a citizens initiative, not something else, not a legislative referendum, but a citizens initiative, something that we work hard, like Stop Dark Money, right, has to get 60% of the vote. And unfortunately, that is leaning to pass, not yet called. Protection from predatory medical debt, passed easily, resoundingly. Stop Dark Money, the Voters' Right to Know Act, passed resoundingly. Yeah, we've been working on that for years. So thank you to everybody who petitioned for that. Thank you to Diane McQueen who worked on that. Thank you, Sin. I know you worked on that very hard as well. I mean, you're pointing. It's the other Diana. Okay. Thank you for everybody who worked on that so hard. Guaranteed Prop 308, in-state tuition for Dreamers, passed resoundingly. Again, people see justice issues, right? Requiring a new affidavit, Prop 309, probably one of the most egregious that was on the ballot, which was is a voter suppression move. It really is. Requiring an affidavit to be filled out and submitted with your ballot, or your vote will not be counted. It's leaning to fail, too close to call.
Wow.
DORR did oppose that. So we'll keep you posted. The Prop 310, which would increase state sales tax for fire districts support, DORR supported that, and it is leaning to fail at this point, which is unfortunate because it would really be something that would have spread out the support, the financial support. People in metropolitan areas are coming up into the rural areas all the time for their hiking, for their recreation, for their vacation. There's not as much income up here. So it's something that is an equity issue. And unfortunately, as I said, it's leaning to fail. So that's the ballot update and the judge update. And that's probably way too into the weeds for people. I'm sorry if I bored you, if you're sleeping on Zoom at home, but we'll turn that back over to Keith and we'll get a conversation going here with all of you. Ronnie?
Yeah, I just have a question. The judge who was
The Supreme Court, Montgomery?
that we were told from
Montgomery.
I was just wondering why, do you know?
Yes, I do know why, and I'm going to give you
He was really tough, I think, on the initiative.
his. I want to read what they wrote about him. Give you the again. So I have the number somewhere about how many reports came in from the attorneys that appear before him stating that he does not have a judicial temperament. So it was the reports from the attorneys with the cases that appear in those courts. They do a survey of that, and the judges themselves. So that was a big part of it. He got flagged for that. He was 15 percentage points below the other two Supreme Court justices that were up for election. I'm sorry, I have too many papers to find it quickly for you, Ronnie, but we could talk afterwards as well. But it was about the reports that came in. B, I see you have a question.
Was he the one that was appointed by a right-wing group to begin with?
You know, I'm not sure. I can't answer that right now, but we could look that up of who his appointment was. I think I'm not sure who his appointment was. Do you know, Keith?
I think he was a Ducey appointee, but I think he was Federalist Society or
Yeah.
something, so he was definitely. So he was ideologically out of step, like very right wing, but also he was poorly rated by his peers just for temperament and stuff. Like there's some other right wing judges on the Supreme Court, but he's the most egregious in terms of even some conservatives don't like him just because he's not, professional or whatever. So that hurt him, I think.
Okay. And I see a question in the back. Toby,
Kathy, just, you might want to repeat the questions because I don't know if people at home can hear.
good question. Okay, thank you. Okay. So what do people want to talk about?
We didn't mention Kathy Hoffman.
Oh, yeah. So, Kathy Hoffman, so it might go to recount because she's probably within 0.5%, but she is down about 9,000 votes. So it's very unlikely that a recount would change the outcome there. So, which is really a shame because Tom Horn's not going to do a good job there. So I don't know exactly why she fell short of some of the other statewide candidates, but I think some of the right-wing messaging on schools, which was just mostly nonsense, kind of carried through.
Yeah, the commercial was, how poorly students did on tests and graduation rates and so on while she was in office. And I don't know the background of it, but I would assume that there's a lot more to that story. And first of all, it was during COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
She did concede, by the way,
Yes.
yesterday. She did a very gracious statement as well. And she did concede. And I agree with Keith that I don't know that it's going to break differently. It will probably be an automatic recount. I have a theory, though, to your question about why her. Look at who did win. We have a split state vote, right? The majority of Democrats got in, but every one of the Republicans that lost was a Trump endorsed Republican. They were out there. They were actively, speaking the Trump speak, right? The ones who were elected, that did not have Trump endorsements were Kathy Tom Horn, and Kimberly Yee. I think if you are a Republican, right, looking to, and you feel that you need to break because your party is gone away from you and gone to such an extreme and is spouting this stuff, and you're bringing yourself, but you've had this ideology your life and you feel a loyalty, the same as we all feel loyalty, right, to our party and our platform, more than party, platform. So if it got away from you and you're breaking your tradition and you're voting for Democrats, right, to stop that move, and there are a couple that are maybe not as egregious, that more reflect your party ideology, you're going to try to vote for them. And I think that benefited Kimberly Yee. I mean, she did the best of any Republican candidate, and I think it benefited Tom Horn as well. Ben, I saw you first, Ben.
Are you gonna go over the state, House and the Senate and the Congress?
Yep.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So it looks like the state House and state Senate are going to stay where they were and break. It'll be 16-14 Republican in the Senate. So they'll have a 2-vote majority, or sort of effectively it's a 1-vote majority because one defection means something doesn't pass. And in the House, it's the same thing. I think it's going to end up 31-29. I do think next cycle, so this is both true statewide and nationally. I think the ADLCC and then the DCCC nationally have to think a little bit differently about which races to target. I think they have to have a broader perspective and challenge more races and not give up so quickly on some races, especially with challengers. There are some races this time that if they would have targeted, they might have won. I think they did a good job in some of the Phoenix areas, but one of the races, like, this is kind of a good part of this is kind of a good story, but it'd be even better if a Democrat would have won. On the redistricting side, the biggest controversy, well, there were a couple. There was the whole Wendy Rogers thing up here where they kept her in a district, but the other one was down in the Tucson area. Vince Leach, who is a state senator, basically had the Tucson Chamber of Commerce and his buddies from the Conservative Country Club Republicans draw him a safe red seat, or what appeared to be a safe red seat. So they intentionally took out blue pockets in the Tucson area. Well, they made it so red, they put in some rural areas like I think Picture Rocks and some of those places, that he ended up losing the primaries to a really hardcore mega Trump lady that just disrupts school boards. So in a sense, he was a victim of his own trying to make it red. He made it so red that they thought he was a rhino and he got voted out. And then the other part of that is that now is that's LD 17 is a winnable seat for the Democrats in 2 years. And they didn't really put any resources into that race this time. And the guy who ran lost by less than 2 percentage points. So that's one they need to put on the map next time. And it's kind of the same with the congressional, both the race for CD6, which is the Tucson area, which is a competitive split district. Kirsten Engel is within about 3,000 votes of being able to win that seat. She won't win it. There's not enough votes left out there. So she's going to lose by about a percentage point to Juan Ciscomani. Same thing with Jevin Hodge in the northern suburbs of Phoenix, the northeast part. Those areas are trending blue, so he lost to Dave Schweikert by like a point and a half. And the DCCC didn't invest in either one of those races. They threw a bunch of money in to protect Greg Stanton, who won by 13 points. So we got to stop being afraid of our own shadow and try to take seats rather than trying to prop up incumbents that are relatively safe. Like, I think in some ways, the Democrats bought into the red wave narrative, and then we're trying to hold on to seats that Greg Stanton, it's good that he won, but he can fend for himself. He doesn't need the resources like those other candidates did. So I think in 2 years, they have to think bigger. There were a couple really nice national surprises, though. I don't know how many people, I'm sure some of you follow like Nate Silver's 538 projection models and stuff. And the two biggest upsets in the country was in northern Colorado. There was Yadira Caraveo, a Hispanic woman who was only given a 9% chance to win that seat because it's a fairly conservative part of Colorado. She won. And then there was an even bigger upset in Southwest Washington State. Marie, I don't know if I'll pronounce her name right, but it's something like Luzenkamp Perez. She's an auto shop owner. Her ads had her cutting down a tree with a chainsaw because she used to work in the timber industry, the kind of candidate that you probably want running in a rural district. She was given a 2% chance to win. And she also prevailed over a guy who was pretty much a white supremacist. So I think in 2 years, they got to think about those kind of races and not give up too quick or not just play defense. But
Yeah. So one of the things that's happening, back to the state level for a second, is Kelly Ward. There's now a real call from within the Republican Party for her to step aside, because again, they're saying, "Oh, you brought us. You know, we see who won in Arizona, and that it was more traditional Republicans. So there's a move to say, you led us over to the dark side. We're revolting, and we'll see what happens. What's your take on that, Keith, with the leadership in the Republican Party at this point?
Well, so yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because I think Republican primary voters keep saying we want the Trumpiest, most extreme candidates we can, but at some point they might get tired of losing because they are. Nancy Barto took out Heather Carter in a primary, and then she lost the general election. It was really great because then Heather Carter sent congratulations to the Democrat and all this kind of stuff. And I think just their strategy, like if you look at Carrie Lake at a fundraiser, she said, "Are there any McCain Republicans in the room?" And then said, "Well, then get the hell out." Well, it sounds like on election day, they said, "Okay, as you wish," So, I mean, at some point, that's just a poor strategy. And I'm glad they did that. But it's, at some point, people are going to get tired of losing. So you'd hope that the Republican Party, well, maybe we don't because we're winning because of it. But in some ways, it would be better if we had two functioning parties. I mean, as much as, as much as I want to win elections, I also want the other side to be like honest people that believe in democracy and not where we're sort of every year like clenching our fists trying to, oh my God, is fascism going to prevail this year? Or are we going to, I mean, the fact that these people still get 48 or 49% of the vote is pretty scary. So it would be nice if the party would, come back to like a functioning party. And I always kind of imagine, I was watching like the US Senate thing. I kind of wonder if in 2012, if somebody would told Mitt Romney he would be one of the guys in the Senate who would preserve same-sex marriage. So, I see some of those decent people on that side, have, learned to listen to the public or have kind of changed their minds. But the sort of far-right Trump group seems almost oblivious to the world around them. And it's,
Don't care.
they just want their side to win.
And it may have been a very different story had Carrie Lake not won the Republican primary. It was Karen Robeson Taylor or Taylor Robeson, I never get it right. If she had been the Republican candidate, we may not be celebrating Katie Hobbs. And again, let's celebrate Katie Hobbs. I mean, it's just such a wonderful win. But yeah, goes right hand in hand with what you're saying there.
Well, the other thing that I had heard was that the Democratic Party or someone was actually in the primaries, actually supporting these far right wing candidates. Have you heard that?
I've heard that as a rumor. I have no information that I could document on that.
So,
That's my story and I'm sticking to it.
in a few races, what happened is sometimes it's reported a little bit misleading. They didn't fund right-wing candidates, but what they did is in a few races across the country is they ran ads basically juicing those candidates to say, well, they'd say the ads were actually negative about the candidate, but they would say something like, so supports Donald Trump. And they get those general election ads out before the primary. And of course, they knew what they were doing because primary voters are, oh, that's my guy, then he supports Trump. But they're also setting them up for the general election. And that strategy was pretty widely criticized. But in every single race where they did that, the Democrat won the general election. So it's hard to, like the one in Michigan. So one of the Republicans, Peter Meyer, had voted for impeachment. So as far as Republicans go, that's kind of maybe who you want. Well, they did run some ads saying how conservative his opponent was. Peter Meyer got destroyed in the primary, but then Hillary Scholten beat the conservative guy by 12 points in the general election. So whether you think the strategy is ethical or not, at this point, it's a very risky strategy, but they won every single one of those races. So it's hard to say it was the wrong strategy from a sort of political standpoint at this point. But of course, you could do that a few other times. And if it does eventually go the wrong way, then of course people will go, well, okay, we gambled here and that didn't work. But
One other thing on the state level that we forgot to mention was the Corporation Commission. Unfortunately, it looks like, there were 2 seats up. It looks like the Republicans prevailed for both those seats.
Oh, no.
Which means not only do we not get Lauren Kuby, who was fantastic, who would have come onto the Corporation Commission, that's a loss. But we're losing Sandra Kennedy, who was on the Corporation Commission and will now no longer be. So we go back to a Corporation Commission that'll be 100% Republican.
Oh, that's awful.
It does go back to what she said too, that neither the Corporation Commission candidates on the Republican side said anything about Trump or election fraud. So where Republicans ran sort of just mainstream conservatives, they won. But where they ran Trump people, they didn't. So
I see. Then,
So now with the Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. Is having a Democratic governor going to affect the Republican legislature? Because she could veto it, so we're gonna make them a little more, less conservative, let's say.
okay. So Ben's question was, what will be the dynamic between a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor? And you're absolutely right to point out, Ben, that she will have veto power. The governor in the state of Arizona does not introduce legislation. Some places I think that can happen, but not here. So there will be, some jockeying. Again, what we've seen is who won, the more traditional Republicans. So will there be some ground to work together and for the governor to build relationships? I think I'm very hopeful that there will be. And I see we have some commentary over here from Diana.
I went to a Katie Hobbs benefit this year where she made the statement that when she's governor, she plans to beat Janet Napolitano's veto record.
I think that's likely to happen too, because the Arizona Republican Party, at least their leadership, hasn't got the memo about moderation yet. They haven't learned from their defeat, because they just made Warren Peterson the state Senate president. He's far right. They put Randy Rogers in charge of the election committee, which is, unironically. So I think she's going to have to veto stuff, because right now I don't know how, if without Hobbs's veto, I don't know how we stop it from being really crazy. I guess maybe TJ Shope or something will be a swing vote on a few things, but I think for the most part, the Republicans have also purged most of their most reasonable people in the primaries. Even Rusty Bowers is a pretty damn conservative guy, but somebody stood up for election integrity. The voters punished him for that on the right, because they want to believe the big lie. Go ahead.
And wait, just one point about Wendy Rogers, because you brought up Wendy Rogers. The irony of this goes to Keith's original point too, about what, Tom was a victim to redistricting, right? Not so much a candidate, but redistricting did him in. Well, Wendy Rogers almost wasn't even going to be in a district to run. And at the last minute, the districting commission made changes to actually squeeze her in. And that is the only reason that we have Wendy Rogers, is the redistricting commission. The independent.
Yeah, so much.
Redistricting commission.
Does Katie Hobbs get to appoint the new lieutenant governor, and what are, even though nothing's been decided, what are the feelings about that?
I believe the bill doesn't take effect for, is it 4 years?
2026. So the question was, does Katie Hobbs get to appoint the new lieutenant governor? So the answer is that the bill that passed won't take effect till 2026. So currently we're in a good situation anyways, because Katie Hobbs is the governor. The Secretary of State now is effectively the lieutenant governor. So if for some reason Katie Hobbs were not to, something would happen where she wouldn't continue in office, Adrian Fontes, who was just elected Secretary of State, would be the next in line of succession. So at this point, we're in a pretty good spot as far as who's going to be in the executive office in the state. And I think, when we looked at the lieutenant governor thing, I think the thought was, one of the reasons I didn't vote, for some of the things Kathy said, I didn't vote for that bill, but I also thought, if Carrie Lake was going to be governor, I wanted Secretary of State just to see. I think sometimes we have a present sense of who's going to be what, but this this thing could work out, because at some point we could end up where the Democrat is the governor, but you have a Republican secretary of state, and then we'll be happy we have the lieutenant governor. So it could go either way. I don't think there's a real partisan tendency for one or the other race. I think they often tend to go the same way. So I don't think it's the worst bill in the world, even though I voted against it. I don't think I mean, it's kind of an extra office that might be superfluous in some ways, but I don't think it's like the worst race to lose there.
I agree. That's exactly where I landed on that too. It's like, I didn't want it because I thought it was an extra office without a definition of the duties. And it was just a bloat, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So, a couple more questions. Let's go over to Al and then Melinda.
At a fundraiser with Katie Hobbs here in Sedona, some months ago, the subject of short-term rental came up and whether she would support a bill that would give control or management of short-term rental back to a local. And she's definitely in favor of that approach. And she did indicate that since she has this veto power, she's going to be expecting bills that she wants if they want any bills that they want. And I don't know if that's in the context of that particular topic, but I would hope that it would encourage people to create a short-term rental bill that at least goes through the process that has value if it got signed.
Right. I don't know if people on Zoom heard that had to do with short-term rentals and Katie using her veto power to help broker some bills that might come forward that would help us with our lack of a short-term rental cap issue. So yes, let's all hope that that can happen, that there be some reasonable legislation, not just lip service legislation, which is all we've seen so far, really. Yeah. So Linda, you had a question.
It was about short-term rentals.
Okay, there you go. Great minds think alike. One other thing is election season is not yet over, folks. We've got Georgia. We all eyes on Georgia. Everybody's like, okay, we've got 50-50, and we've got, the Kamala Harris that will break the ties. So we're in control. It's not the same. Having 50-50 with the tiebreaker is not the same as having 51, which actually gives you then the ability to appoint chairs, committee chairs. Instead of a shared power broker, you really want this. So the Warnock race is critical to us. If you can do anything, if you can write more postcards, if your hand hasn't cramped up from all the ones you did for Scott, please talk with Toby and make sure that you're going to do postcards. Toby's a postcard lady. If you can call anybody you know in Georgia, please do that. If you could send some money to that campaign so that they could flood the airwaves, please do that. That race is critical. We really want that Georgia seat.
Now, add to that, those Senate terms are 6 years, so you don't get a chance to turn it around into like a House race. So you can't afford to lose the key Senate races. The other part too is in 2 years, the Democrats will have a really tough Senate map to defend. So we need that extra insurance seat because John Tester in Montana will be running in 2 years. He's always done very well in those races, but Montana's a Trump +20 state. So, you don't want to sort of hang your chances there. Sherrod Brown in Ohio's got to run in 2 years. Ohio's been moving in the wrong direction. Manchin's got to run. That's a Trump 40 state. And I don't exactly love Joe Manchin, but it's better to have a Democratic majority than just to give up that seat. So,
Cinema's running too.
yeah, Cinema or Gallego is running for the Senate, depending on who wins that primary. Gallego hasn't announced, so that's a prediction, but.
Toby, do you have a question on Zoom?
Okay, I did have a couple of questions on Zoom, but I was just gonna mention that the ballots drop in Georgia on the 28th of November and on the 2nd of December. So we really need to, if we're gonna do something, as far as calling or postcarding, whatever we're gonna do, or they're saying money's.
I found it difficult to do. Yeah, I found it difficult to do some of the postcarding. I've been trying the last few days and I got some, I happen to be in Texas right now. I got some from the Democratic office, but they have a little Christmas decoration on them. And I think the one you just mentioned, they don't want any decoration on them like that. So I've got to start from square one. And then other groups want you, and they're going to total nonpartisan, just vote message, which I like. And other groups want you to download, print, and I don't have any of that available. So I'm struggling. If you know somebody that's, you know, to get 50 addresses without all these restrictions, it's very difficult. So if you hear of anything, if you know of another one. And then there's other groups that are on the ground knocking on doors, particularly of people of color in rural areas. And I've thought that's through the vote, through the Unitarians. And I've thought also that's a way to donate them money to help them. They're shipping people into Georgia to knock on doors, to get people out to vote. Yeah. I think that's the answer. I really do, especially living in Arizona for 50 years. You know, I think the more people we get to vote, the better a chance we have.
Thank you, thank you. I see a question over here, yes.
When I was looking over the results coming in on the Secretary of State's website, I saw relatively low turnouts for both Pima and Coconino counties, where, you know, we have really strong Democratic majority votes coming out of those. So I was quite surprised how low the turnout was. It was better in Maricopa. Do you have any knowledge or explanation for that?
So there's a lot of young voters in Coconino County, so presidential turnout, for whatever reason, tends to be better on midterm. The one thing I have heard a lot about turnout, and it looks like, and some people checked the website pretty early, so I know there were, like a week ago, people were like, oh, statewide turnout's only 49%, it's terrible, and they don't realize that the votes are still coming in. Not saying, you're right about those counties a little bit. I mean, that's true, they don't vote the way Yavapai does, but overall, the turnout in the state will be pretty close to what it was in 2018. Some counties are going to be a little up, and some will be a little down. So I don't think turnout relative to other midterms was bad, but it would be great if we could get presidential turnout every year from you know, disenfranchised groups or groups that are less likely to turn out. That would be huge if we could get that. I have seen some stuff nationally. I haven't looked at it deep enough to see, but that Gen Z or the youngest generation turnout was higher for midterm than it had been in the past, and that they've overwhelmingly voted Democratic. So that's good, but they still don't vote at the rates of people that are over 65, and it'd be great if they would, because we'd win every election then. So.
Yes, Maxwell Frost in Florida, 25 years old, and which is the minimum age to be a House member. So actually, that's a good point too, to talk a little bit about some of the diversity around the nation. We did pretty well in some places. It was in Oregon, Maura Healey became the first woman to win the Massachusetts governorship, and is the first openly lesbian governor in the nation. So that's a good diversity there. We've got Democrat Wes Moore, made history as Maryland's first Black governor, which makes him only the third African-American governor in the nation. So there were some wins across the country for diversity.
Go ahead.
How are the Native Americans doing, vote turnout wise?
So I looked at, because in O'Halloran's district in CD2, what was kind of nice is two of the counties that exceeded 2018 turnout were Apache and Navajo. So, and part of that I think is the tribal programs up there. There's a group called Northeast Arizona Democrats that mostly formed in 2020 and have a really robust program. They're kind of run from the Navajo County Party, but they pay their organizers and stuff, which is really important to do because in those communities, often people don't have the luxury of just doing volunteer work, which is one thing that Democratic Party also has started to do better, needs to continue to do is actually pay people to do the work in certain communities, and it'd be great even here if people could get paid to do the work, because it really is real work. But I mean, at least some people that are retired or independently, you know, middle class or whatever can afford to, you know, drive to the next town and do some door knocking. I don't mind working for free sometimes, but I do think it's important that if we're going to try to organize, say, communities of color or poor neighborhoods anywhere, that we actually pay people to do the work and not just assume that it's something that, families that are trying to put food on the table can just do in their free time. And I think so the party, just like intern programs and GC, it shouldn't just be something that people have to be sort of well off to do. It should be something that we can do where people can make a living doing it and, help drive turnout. I think I might have spiraled past the original question, but the turnout in those communities was pretty good. Oh, I know what else I was going to say about that is I think another thing that might have helped turnout on the Navajo Nation is there was a competitive presidential election. There always is a presidential election up there in midterm years, but I think 4 years ago, everybody kind of maybe knew that Jonathan Nez was going to win, so the turnout wasn't quite as high. This time he actually lost the presidency to his opponent, but people on both sides were motivated, so there was a high turnout for the tribal elections. And I'm glad they're on the same day now. Sometimes people still have to go from one polling place to another, so we always have a drop off there. If the federal election and the tribal election isn't in the same building, but the Navajo Nation has done a pretty good job of trying to consolidate those. And I kind of wish some of the other tribes like White Mountain Apache and stuff would hold their tribal elections at the same time as the federal and state elections, because people turn out for tribal elections. They don't always turn out for the federal and state, but federal and state policy, federal especially, is really important in tribal communities. So to the extent that we can have those elections on the same day, it would help them have representations.
Toby, are there any questions coming in from Zoom? I don't want to ignore our home audience.
Just a couple about Kathy Hoffman that I had down here. Gloria said, wanted to remind us that students had lower scores during COVID. And the Thompsons said that Hoffman had a clean election campaign, so she was outspent.
Okay, thank you for,
I don't know if people can hear that.
you should have a mic back there.
Yeah, anyone who talks should have a mic.
Yeah. Any other questions on Zoom, or otherwise I'm going to take more from the audience here? Ronnie?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. You mentioned Westmore in Maryland winning. And a number of years ago, my book club read a book that he wrote called The Other Westmore. And I can't remember, he was either from Chicago or Detroit, from a single parent, no father around, very poor, lived in the projects, as well as this other Westmore did the same. And how this Westmore had, in both cases, the mothers were working a couple of jobs and they were hardly ever around. But this Westmore, who just won the governorship in Maryland, had an aunt who really believed in him and kept after him about his schoolwork, actually paid for him to go to private school. And that set him up with a good education and a good background to become now the mayor of Maryland. And the other Westmore is in jail for life for killing someone in a robbery.
For those at home who may not have heard that, the difference between the two Westmores and what a support system can mean, where one goes on to a governorship and another goes on to incarceration. All right. Thank you for that point. Ben?
Two things. One is, I wanted to know, how do the tribes usually vote in terms of politically? And also, how was Tom's district gerrymandered? What did they drop out and what did they add that made it so that he lost?
Yeah, so the two questions, one was how was Representative O'Halloran's district gerrymandered? I'll take that one first and then lean into the how did the tribes vote. And so on the gerrymandered district, basically what they added was they added all the rest of Yavapai County. So in this current district, he has Sedona Village of Oak Creek, Camp Verde, and Rimrock. Sedona and Village vote Creek vote blue. They're and increasingly so. And then the rest of Yavapai County, for the most part, votes very red, extremely red. Other than Jerome and Clarkdale are both blue or competitive, but everything like Prescott, Black Canyon City, very conservative. It also added all of Gila County, so it included Payson, which wasn't in the district before. It included Gold Canyon and Florence and Pinal County. It took out some Hispanic communities in Pinal County that voted Democrat, like Eloy. And then it took out the suburbs of Tucson, Oro Valley, and Marana, which is way back in 2014 when I first worked on Kirkpatrick's race. Marana and Oro Valley were always scary. The Pima County stuff would come in and cut into our margins. But over the years, it's like a lot of other suburban areas has been trending blue. Biden carried some precincts in Oro Valley. Tom O'Halloran and Mark Kelly carried even a couple more precincts in Oro Valley. So that was a hard area to lose because it's a high education area in a spot where people have been trending more towards the Democrats, like a lot of the Phoenix suburbs as well. As far as how the tribes vote, and this is actually a bright spot in Tom's race, some of his best overperformance was in tribal communities. In fact, there was something really kind of ironic in getting the results in, both that show the resilience of Katie Hobbs' campaign in rural areas, but also showed that Democratic messaging for moderate candidates really didn't make a difference. Like one thing, this is a little off the question he asked, but one thing that was really interesting in the results was in Yavapai County, Mark Kelly got 36% of the vote, Katie Hobbs got 36%, Tom O'Halloran got 36%. So it essentially means 64% of the people are like, I don't care how good of a Democrat or what the Democrat says. I don't care if they're an ex-police officer. I don't care what they, I'm going to vote Republican straight down the ticket. In some ways that was good for Hobbs. Her performance is a little bit surprising that she didn't have rural drop off, but it was tough for Tom O'Halloran because if he's not getting people to split their ticket, there's no way you're going to win a +8 Trump district. Now, it's kind of interesting is where Tom overperformed Katie Hobbs was in some of the bluest parts of the district. So it's a little off brand because Tom is more the centrist and maybe Katie Hobbs more the conventional liberal. But part of that was, I think, because those are parts of the district where he's been their congressman for 3 terms. So they know him, like in Flagstaff, he's delivered on things like fire and flood prevention. So that came back to help him. But also the tribes, he's done so much in some of those communities. They vote heavily Democratic, but they actually voted in bigger percentages for Tom even than they did in the past. So in White Mountain Apache, he got 92% of the vote. Wow. Katie Hobbs got 86, which is also really, really good, but there's a gap there so that, 6% of the voters were Terry Lake, Tom O'Halloran voters on tribal land there, so figure that one out. And then on Navajo Nation, his performance was better than we'd seen before. We don't have precinct data for most of the counties, but we do from Navajo County. And so the northernmost precinct in Navajo County is called Red Buttes. It includes the tribal community of Kayenta. Tom got 88.5% of the vote there. So really solid again. And even the Hopi tribe, which the tribes always consider a Republican tribe, they vote about 70% Democrat right now. So they're not Republican, they're just more Republican than their neighbors, but 70% anywhere else we'd call, that's bluer than Pima County or Flagstaff. So if anybody tells you the Hopi are Republicans, that's not really giving them enough credit because they vote about 70% Democratic. So.
Al?
I'm curious, how well did the strategy or philosophy of the clean election approach actually work for candidates that went down that path?
Not well.
So
not successfully, but go ahead.
Yeah, here's what I have to say about clean elections. This might be controversial because I know some people like it, but if only one side's doing it, it's the political equivalent of unilateral disarmament. It's like, oh, we're going to play by the rules and we're only going to take this much money, but you on the other side can raise 5 or 10. Wendy Rogers raised $4 million for a state legislative race, mostly out of state money because she's the loudest carnival barker about election fraud. And so she can raise money from all over the country. And that's a tough race to win anyway. So my point isn't that we could beat Wendy Rogers, but the point is she can raise $4 million and her opponent runs clean elections. But, you know, like in the corporation commission race, the Republicans can raise unlimited amount of money. And if our candidates are capped at a certain amount, you can't even get on air and do TV and stuff. And I hate the way we do elections here, where money is such an important thing. But unless we have like campaign finance reform where both sides have to abide by the rules, to just say, well, we're not going to raise money, we're going to play by the rules, but they can do whatever they want, is not a good strategy politically. It's great to have principles, but you also, in order to affect public policy, you do have to win. And that may seem kind of cynical, but I'm not a big fan of clean elections candidates, except maybe in races where it's just to get a message out, like it's better than not running a candidate. But I think at statewide races, you got to run them all to win. You can't sort of run a campaign on a shoestring budget to win a statewide race.
And following up on that, we really owe a debt of gratitude to our three Democrats who ran for the state legislature here, Mike Fogel, Neil Sinclair, and Kathy Ransom, for running, and they ran as clean election candidates. And I think they knew going in that they weren't going to have the resources that it took, and it doesn't. Did we want to divert resources here when it had, what was it, came to a 29-point swing for, when that was redistricted, 29-point Republican advantage was the result of that redistricting. So they knew that going in, yet they said, you know what, we're going to be on the ballot, we're going to raise issues, we're going to go out there. I mean, really a big debt of gratitude to the three of them. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And also, it's a good proving ground. I mean, all three of them, I think, are going to be involved now in new ways with the party and local campaigns going forward, that there are futures ahead for these people. These are intelligent, well-spoken, committed, dedicated people. And again, thank you to them. And another, on the discrepancy on funding, it comes down to even more than clean elections. I want to point out that here again in Sedona, in the local mayor's race, we had a candidate where money did not buy the election. Yeah. We are so grateful to our very smart electorate here who saw through it, because the spending on the race, now there are two ways. There's the candidates raise, do their fundraising, and the fundraising for the campaigns was 2-to-1. Okay, Scott was outspent by the campaign 2-to-1, raised at 2-to-1 and spent 2-to-1 by his opponent. But there were also independent expenditures, which are not part of the campaign expenses. There is somebody like Linda, you just want to take an ad supporting Keith for something, right? You can do that, and it's not Keith's campaign paying for it. But if you bring all of that money in, of the independent expenditures, the spending on the local race here in Sedona for mayor was 3-to-1 spending.
Wow.
This is more money that has ever been spent on a local race like this. It's astronomical, the amount of money that was spent this year. Astronomical. And it makes it harder going forward. It makes it harder for people to run. It makes it harder to run for school board seats, council seats, fire board seats. I mean, something like let's say it again, the Red Rock Road Enhancement Maintenance District. I can't even say it. Yeah, you're gonna have to start raising money to run in these places. I mean, it's just crazy what's the precedents that are being set. We had a question from Diana and then Toby.
I just wanted to say on that election, at the election night party, I mistakenly said that our canvassers with DORR and Mission for Arizona hit every household in Arizona twice, every household in the VOC twice. In fact, we hit every household in Sedona 4 times.
Wow. For those at home, Diana's giving statistics on the canvassing effort that was done by DORR, and that every voter's got knocked on their door 4 times. They were given information about the candidates that we supported, the ballot propositions we supported, which directly translates. Thank you, Diana and Lama. We're big organizers of that. Thank you, both of you. Yeah, round of applause, really. But that is why we have a 76% turnout rate. in this area as well. It's that kind of grassroots work that DORR does. It's why ballot propositions make a change, why you get something like a Coconino kind of local ballot props that people are aware of. So on the local level, you cannot beat that kind of grassroots effort. Thank you. Toby.
Shelley said that they can hear us in the audience. That's something good to know. And Lama said that interesting to note that while the legislative candidates lost, they received a lot more of the vote than was expected. And they got a lot of crossover, independent and Republican votes. And just one other thing, Sharon Edgar is on, and she said that to Lama's point, Kyle Nitschke, the clean elections candidate in LD7, also performed much better than could be estimated at the beginning of the race.
Right. That's really important information because it shows, and Keith made that point before, about we need to start becoming more aggressive in terms of races and districts. Instead of putting a lot of the resources into people who could safely hold, we need to start really campaigning in places because we make little inroads. And Arizona is changing. I mean, and it's not so much, rural districts are still very red and the more metropolitan districts are very blue. But when you look at a place that's got changing demographics like Maricopa County, that's what's purple. And that's where the density is. The rest of Arizona, Karen McClellan made this point on the radio show the other morning, so credit where it's due, it's not my thought. The red area, Sedona is a blue bubble within a red area. Cottonwood, though, where Mike Cosentino is doing a lot of work down there, thank you, Mike, is got some changing demographics. We need to be putting the resources in there and the door knocking there and the grassroots because we see changing voter trends. We see it in Cornville, in the unincorporated areas. Again, it's hard to fight the county. Yavapai County is big county, geographically big, but also population in terms of some of the other counties that are much smaller populations in the state. But it is very red entrenched. But we're making inroads. We're making inroads.
And I do think it's important to contest every race, and also to not just think in terms of election cycles. Like there's long-term projects here, like in areas that are red, you have to plant yourself in the community. You're not going to win this year, maybe not the next cycle, but you have to be there to have a chance later on or to change it. Like I'm old enough to remember, like sometimes I think people think of politics as being fixed. But I'm old enough to remember a presidential election when Mike Dukakis, the Democrat, won West Virginia and lost California. And that was in my lifetime. So we always think in California is deep blue and West Virginia is hopelessly red, but those places change. And, so there are places where you can make inroads or even in 2016, I think Trump only won Utah by like 13 points because there was a third party candidate. We should not think of areas as lost causes. We should be strategic as we get close to an election and not, put unlimited resources into races where we're polling down 40. We should always run a candidate because you've got to build that infrastructure. So it's really good that we ran a Democratic slate in this very red district because
And it's not only building the infrastructure, it's building the voter track record, the history, so that we can see what the changes are. Without that voter information, we don't know. We can't track that, right? So it's very important. I think we only have time for 2 more questions. Linda wants us to wrap up. I'm going to take, yes, Mark.
Yeah, there are good trends we're seeing, but we're going to be constrained by the legislative and congressional districts drawn by the Independent Redistricting Commission. Are there any challenges that are working their way through the process or on the horizon, or are we going to be stuck with those for the next decade?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm not sure where they're at. I know initially there were some challenges, especially on the legislative one. The congressional one's a little tougher because the commission passed it 5-0. On the legislative, and part of that was sort of the Democrats were compromising to prevent an even worse map. Like maybe they folded their cards too soon, but one of the initial maps, the Republicans wanted for O'Halloran's district, they want to include all of Mojave County. That would have been the total kiss of death. I mean, at least this one is marginally competitive, but on the state legislative districts, I'm not sure if any of those court challenges are still going, but there's a pretty strong case that there was some backroom deals both on the Wendy Rogers and Vince Leach thing that shouldn't have been allowed, but whether court will hear them or not, I don't know. I haven't heard that.
I thought I heard that the cases had been withdrawn, but I could be very wrong on
That
that.
might be
But
right,
but I
'cause
thought I heard that there are no more pending cases. That was the way it was put, so. And then Toby, and then we're gonna wrap.
Okay, just from the chat, I hadn't finished, I had forgotten that Kyle Nitschke went door to door and was so successful that he's thinking that he made such good inroads that he might run again in the next election. And somebody had a question whether they thought, they were asking you, Keith, whether they thought that Tom O'Halloran would run again in 2024.
Probably have to ask Tom that. I don't know. Like, one thing I know is whenever he retires, he always gives up on retirement and tries to do something. So I'm sure we haven't heard of the last of him. I'm sure he will do something in the political and public space sphere. Whether he runs for CD2 again, I don't know. So we'll wait and see, but definitely that's a race that somebody needs to run and contest in 2 years. Also very important that we run strong candidates in the Schweikert and Tucson districts, because we're very close this time and are probably trending our direction as well.
Again, just to close, fingers crossed, eyes crossed, toes crossed, everything for Chris Mays. Okay, keep your eyes on that. And Georgia, please find a way to get involved in Georgia. This is really important to us. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to turn this back over to Linda.
I don't have anything else to say. Just thank you all for coming today. Thank you all that are on the Zoom screen with us. Welcome, great information today, and we'll see you all January the 15th. Have wonderful holidays. January the 15th for our annual meeting
At St. Andrew.
at St. Andrews.
5 to 7.
5 to 7. There we go. You got it all. Thank you.
Thank you.